The SciComm Collective acknowledges the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the lands we study, write and record on, and their sovereignty was never ceded. Hello and welcome to the SciComm Collective.
Different useful knowledge in different areas.
The joy is sharing it, making science accessible, the ignored final step of the scientific method. Every different perspective.
Science is culture.
The SciComm Collective brings science and science communication to you.
Welcome back to the SciComm Collective. I'm Emma, your host for today. And on this episode, I'm really excited to be talking with Pamela Freeman, award-winning children's author, whose book Seed to Sky, Life in the Daintree won the Whitley Award for Children's Conservation Awareness. Congratulations, Pamela. It's great to have you on our show.
Lovely to be here, Emma.
So I think the very first question is, what inspires you to write children's books, particularly those with ecological themes like Sea to Sky?
The children's book thing is just, I started my working life really as a scriptwriter for first the Powerhouse Museum, which was all writing videos and audios about science, basically, and social history. And then I went to ABC Kids, which was then called Children's and Education. And I made a lot of television nonfiction for the education market. You know, people may remember For the Juniors or Behind the News. And so I've always been interested in nonfiction. I started writing fiction for children there. And then what actually started the whole natural history thing was that I got an opportunity to get a really cheap ticket on a flight over Antarctica. So a few years ago, Qantas would run these flights that were a 12-hour flight that just goes down over Antarctica, over the South Pole, over the Mawson base, and then back to Australia. And you don't land or anything. You just fly over the top and get to look at it.
Wow.
And it was just an extraordinary experience, you know. And I felt that I'd done a fair bit of travel, but I felt that was the first time I'd seen anything that was really alien, you know, really, really different. And I came back and I was just talking about it to my publisher, Kathy Tasker at Koala Books at that stage. And she went, write me a book about Antarctic animals.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, write me a book about Antarctica. It's on the syllabus. I went, okay. And then we talked that through and we came up with Pole to Pole, which was the first one. And originally it was going to just be Antarctic animals and fish, obviously. But then I came across the tern, the Arctic tern, which does literally fly from one end of the world to the other twice a year. So it flies from the Arctic summer to the Antarctic summer. So it breeds twice a year. And that just blew my mind because, you know, if you know how big a tern is, right, they're little birds, you know. We're talking about it's slightly smaller than a normal seagull. And the idea that this tiny little bird could fly from one end of the world to the other twice a year just that sent my mind insane. And so that's where we came up with Pole to Pole, where we follow the tern.
You said that you mentioned it to your publisher. So you already had some works that you had published before that?
No nonfiction. It had all, well, not really any nonfiction. It was all fiction or stories based on real events, but they were like fictional, you know, written as fiction.
Yeah.
But most of it, almost all of it was fiction, a lot of it fantasy. No, it was just going over Antarctica and me going, wow, you know.
Yeah.
And that book did really well. It was a book week book. And so they asked me to do another one, and I'd always been fascinated by volcanoes. And in that case, it's a book about soil. It's a book about where do we get the minerals from, which is basically volcanoes. That's Fire to Life. And then there was a gap of a few years while I was writing mostly adult books, but also I was writing, you know, big fantasy trilogies and stuff. And then I saw on the news that Lake Eyre was filling up. And I had always been fascinated by the idea of the inland sea, the idea that the explorers who went after looking for the inland sea, which they were all convinced was there, were right. They were just really, really, really late.
Yes. And that's Kati Tanzo.
millions of years later. Yeah. Uh, but so Lake Eyre is kind of the last remnant of that. And I was really fascinated by it, always had been as a child. And so when I saw it on the news, I pitched it to my publisher, different publisher, Walker Books at that stage. Basically, I pitched it honestly so that I could go to Lake Eyre and it'd be tax deductible.
Oh, that's fantastic. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? That you've got the ideas that you've already brought to life and then something that you're interested in and that you want to share. And so how do you approach breaking down the more complex topics and even the research process? So you just started talking about that research process that you said that you wanted to do the book, which turned into Desert Lake, Katitanda
Desert Lake.
Here?
That's right. Katitanda Lake. Yeah, it's called Desert Lake. I did a huge amount of research.
Yes.
Like enormous. And this is true for all of my books. And there are two reasons for that. The one is that these books, people have to be able to rely on them. They have to be able to rely on the idea that what is in them is true. Because teachers rely on them, kids will believe them 100%. You can't have any fuzziness in them.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that the more research you do, the more you come across the cool bits. And it's the cool bits that end up making the book. You know, these ecosystems are just too complex to put everything into a picture book. You can't do it. I mean, you can put more in a picture book than you can in a normal book because you've got the images, and those images are incredibly complex and equally well researched. I mean, Liz does just as much research as I do off the back of mine. I mean, I send her a species list and stuff like that, and she goes off and does her own visual research.
That's Liz Anelli, who
Liz Anelli is the illustrator. Yeah. So we've done 3 books together: Desert Lake, Dry to Dry, The Seasons of Kakadu, which is about the monsoon cycle, and Now Seed to Sky. And she's just a genius. She's the star of the show, frankly, Emma. I mean, she's nice enough to say that the words are inspiring, but really, you only have to look at these books. It's like carrying an art exhibition around. So I feel very, very, very privileged to work with her. So, you know, they're very complex and you've still got to engage children.
Yes.
And I know these books get used from preschool up to year 7 or 8. And so they're part of a series called Nature's Storybook that Walker does. And it has 2 text types. It has the lyrical flowing text, which tells the story of whatever it is. And then there's a sans serif text type, which is more scientific information. And that way you bridge a much wider age range. So if you're reading it to kinder, you just read the lyrical text. And then if you're working with year 5 or 6, they read it themselves and you can set them tasks based on the scientific stuff. But knowing that it has to go from kinder all the way through, you have to find things that will interest all of those age groups.
Yeah.
Put them in. Unfortunately, there's always so many things. You know, these ecosystems are so interesting.
Yes. So do you find a story? Is that how you're going across it, or you're focused first on the science?
Well, a bit of both. Some of the stories are very straightforward. We knew Kakadu was going to be about wet to dry and back again.
Yeah.
Or dry, wet and back again. That was the big decision. Do we go dry, wet, or do we go wet, dry, wet? And that was basically based on the title. Dry to Dry is a much better title than Wet to Wet.
There you go. Yeah, for sure.
So that's how we did it. And there was no real reason to, it was no reason to do it one way or the other. But that's fine. Dry to Dry worked really well. Desert Lake has that. I'm interested in cycles. I'm interested in repetition. And of course, the story with Lake Eyre is it fills up and then it dries out again, you know.
Yes.
And so you have fantastic stuff about estivation of frogs. And when it does flood, the river comes down faster than a galloping horse. You know, It's absolutely terrifying. You've got to get out of the way. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff. Those kinds of nuggets are the things that make the kids go, whoa, you know. And you're looking for those things on each page to engage the interest. And then you bolster those with the other information that is equally interesting, but may not be immediately, whoa, kind of stuff.
Yes. You need the grab your attention moments. Yeah. And I like how you were saying the different ways that your audience of your readers can engage with the book. So you mentioned how the illustrations are really, to you, extremely important. Do you think that that's one of the more effective way of engaging children in science, or is it that combination with is it analogies, the story? What do you think is?
Look, I think with natural history, you absolutely have to have the images. 100% have to have the images. But you have to contextualize those images. They're almost meaningless on their own. If you just put the images in the book, what kids do is go, oh, yeah, and they flip over really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you say, look, the dingo is watching that bandicoot, is it going to eat it? Suddenly they go, oh, look at them. Oh, look, his eyes are looking at the bandicoot. The bandicoot doesn't know it's there. Oh, my God. Right? And so they become engaged in the image. So you do need both. I don't think the pictures on their own, I mean, there are stories you can tell with pictures on their own, but you can't tell really complex stories in the same way.
And I agree from...
Unless you're Jenny Baker, who manages to do it. I don't know how.
Reading books with my own kids, I feel like it's a skill to teach children how to develop a narrative from an image by itself, because so many books have the text that accompanies, that tells them almost where to start, So it's great if you can do it and you know how to and all of those things. But I think also adults, they would probably struggle to describe what's going on without some kind of text and hint.
And visual literacy is part of the curriculum now. And these books are being used for that, as well as for science and for fun. I've learnt so much working with Liz that, I have trouble drawing stick figures, honestly. So I came off a very low base working with illustrators. And this kind of work, we often do gigs together at schools or at writers' festivals and listening to her talk about how she does things. And I should tell your listeners that authors and illustrators typically do not work together like this.
Okay.
I didn't meet Liz until after Desert Lake had been published.
Wow.
And that's very often the case. I have Philip Blythe, for example, who illustrated Pole to Pole and Fire to Life. I've never met. And everything gets mediated through the editor. And that's a good thing, because you can be honest and go, well, I don't think this character really looks like my character, and they can then go back and you can say things like, I hate this. I just hate this picture, and then they go.
You got someone to say it for you.
So, yeah, that's right. And so very, very rarely do authors and illustrators work together. But it was clear to me, we met and we became friends, and it was clear to me that she's the focus, the drawings are the focus of these books. And so with Kakadu, with Dry to Dry, she went off and did her sketching research, and then we spent a day in the studio going, well, what do you want to draw, and then adjusting the text so that the illustrations would be the best that she thought for those images. And same with Seed to Sky. And the great thing about editing a picture books go through about 50 drafts. The fewer words you have, the more perfect each one of them has to be. And so the last time with Seed to Sky, I sat down with my editor and we cut out maybe 15 or 20% of the words.
Wow. That's the last time as well.
Yeah. Right at the end, after the finished art was in.
So you can see how they complement each other.
Yeah, exactly. And you might want to give more space to a particularly great drawing, or so very few authors and illustrators actually work together the way that Liz and I do.
Yeah.
But we do love working together, and we're good mates, and it works because I know her work is so good. I don't ever have to worry. I'll never have to say I hate it. I'll never have that kind of problem with her.
Yeah.
So, it's been a great pleasure and joy, really.
It sounds amazing. It sounds, from what you're saying, unusual in the picture book process. And so for our listeners that may be interested in, they could be someone that's a great illustrator of science and is thinking, how could that become a book? They could be someone that's a great storyteller of science and wondering how that could become a book. It sounds like it's very important for them to know, don't try to do both.
Well, there are people who can do both, but it's so rare.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
so rare. The big thing is don't get your friend to illustrate it.
Mhm.
So
Become friends with your illustrator, but don't get your friend
don't
to
get your friend
illustrate.
to be your illustrator. No. So what happens is that when you're a new author, publishers like to put you in with an experienced illustrator. So
Mhm.
there's at least one name on the book that the librarians know,
I see.
because most picture books are sold to libraries. But also, it's very rare that two amateurs are as good as each other and at professional level. So you might have a text which is fantastic and the illustrations are kind of, yeah, they're nice, but they're amateur, right? It's much easier to get an amateur text to professional level than it is to get an amateur illustrator to have the skills they need, because editors know how to work with text because they're word people.
Yes.
And so they can be confident that this is a fantastic idea, we can work on the text. But, these drawings are almost there. Well, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to get those illustrations up to sketch, right? So they will not, if you send illustration and text together, they will not take it. They will not take the text and reject the illustrations, because that way lies so much drama. And if you're somebody who does both, what you need to do is to send in the text with a couple of sample drawings and go, this is my background as an artist. And if you don't have a background as an artist, probably you're not going to be good enough, honestly, because the quality of illustration in Australian picture books is very high, probably the highest in the world.
I mean, yay,
But
that's
you are an
amazing.
artist, and you may be an artist, and you may be a scientific illustrator, for example. So, tell them what your background is, give them a couple of samples, and say something like, I would love to illustrate this book, but I understand that you may wish to choose another illustrator.
Great. Yeah.
And then they will have the option of going, well, these illustrations, they're great for a textbook, but they're no good for kids.
Yes.
But the text is great, and we could pull so-and-so in, this illustrator we love, to do it, and that would be fantastic. So you've got to give them, got to be professional. You've got to give them the options.
Showing the flexibility.
Show your flexibility, give them a chance to look at your work. The other thing is that if you're an illustrator who wants to get work, they're always looking for good illustrators, because the really good ones are booked up years in advance.
Wow.
So what they're looking for is naturalism. If you want to do natural history, pick a couple of animals, don't do cats, everybody does cats. Do them in a number of different poses. That's the real key. And put together a portfolio.
That's amazing. Because like you said, how those illustrations, how the visuals are really engaging is so important. And that's fantastic advice. Thank you. So why don't we go back to writing for a little bit? Sure. Your strengths. Believe me, I'm also a stick figure drawer, so I get it. So you were saying about the different age groups and your audiences, and that you adapt your messaging by having multiple messages on the page.
Yes, that's right.
What about, you also talked about syllabus, so you're intentionally choosing topics that will align with the Australian curriculum? So you've already got an audience in mind?
Well, it's a bit of both. Yeah, certainly if you're pitching a new idea to a publisher, if you can point out to where it occurs in the national curriculum, that will give you a much higher chance of getting picked up. But it also shows them that you're a professional and you understand your job. Because obviously the key is to get it into libraries. That's the biggest sale for picture books. So if they can market it to library suppliers as this addresses this part of the Australian curriculum, then the library suppliers can market it to their clients, So, having that information saves them doing any work and shows you're a professional. Sometimes it works around, comes all the way around. So Dry to Dry, for example, is now on the New South Wales curriculum.
Wow.
As
That's
a recommended text
achievement
for particular sections. So those were the sections we targeted. So now that book is now and this is several years after it was published. It got picked up earlier this year. And so we've got a new rush of sales now, several years after it was published. So obviously we're hoping that it's going to get onto other states' curricula as well. So knowing what it is you're selling is the thing. And sometimes it's like a cute idea, which doesn't require that kind of thing. But if you're expecting it to be used in a classroom, figure out which classrooms, what age group, what subject, and the national curriculum is the place to look for that. It's all online.
I am very much reminded of the first tenet of science communication that we talk about here, which is purpose, audience, message. What is it that you're trying to say? Who are you trying to say it to? And what do you want them to take away from that? Why are you doing this? But there's another thing, which is also evaluation. How do you evaluate what young readers are taking away from your books? Obviously, the education system's adults.
Obviously, first of all, you go through what's my editor taking away from it.
Yeah, okay. Editor's the most important.
But you got most children's authors go out to schools. We do school visits.
Okay.
Or we do writing workshops at libraries or those kinds of things. And you get a lot of feedback, obviously, from kids and teachers. We also get a lot of emails and letters and drawings from kids doing their own drawing of a moth that they found, or, so you get a lot of that sort of stuff back, which is lovely. And that also feeds in. I've been doing workshops for a very long time, and your understanding of each age group grows the more you do them. And so you have a better idea about what's likely to interest kids at different ages. And it kind of builds on itself. But the workshops themselves are lots of fun, and the Meet the Author talks. You get questions all that you have. If you do a Meet the Author talk, which is the most common thing, the questions people ask, the kids ask, is really show you what they think happened in that book.
Yes, yeah.
You get questions about, particularly the fiction books. Why did so and so do such and such? And you didn't do that. That's not the book you're thinking about.
It's amazing. You're really getting that feedback then. You're being able to go out there and engage with directly the people that are reading them.
And if I were writing stuff that I wasn't sure about, I would go to my local school.
Mm-hmm.
So I would find a connection to a school. Now I have enormous connections to schools because my siblings are all teachers, but I would find a connection to a school, your children's classes, your nieces and nephews, your siblings, whatever, and try it out on the kids. And most teachers are absolutely fine with that, particularly if it's part of something like a degree, or then there's a sort of imprimatur there for them, that you're not some weird person coming in. But that's why you need a kind of personal connection to get in usually. Obviously for me, it's a different matter. If I ring up a school and say, I want to try out my new picture book text on the Great Barrier Reef, can I come in and talk to year 4? They go, oh, of course you can.
Yeah.
Because they pay me to come, right? So they're getting a freebie. But for most people, I think schools are open to doing that kind of stuff because they're interested in the kids learning the process of writing and getting to do drafts. And so you can certainly contact schools and go out and try it out.
That sounds amazing. What a great encouragement to people as well. And one thing was this idea of the feedback. Have you ever had kids give you an idea and then what would you do about that? Like ethically, is there something that you need to consider there?
All the time are trying to give you ideas. But mostly they're about, will you put me in a story?
Yeah.
My niece last week said, can you write a story about me? And indeed I did. Not that time, but the last time she asked that, I wrote a story about her and her sister, the twins being mermaids. That was during lockdown and they were very bored. So I decided then I gave it away to people. So it's typically about them. If they come up with a story that's fiction, I encourage them to write it themselves. Mm-hmm. They don't tend to come up with so many nonfiction ideas, but they will tell me interesting facts. Mm-hmm. And I will go, that's fantastic. Great that you managed to figure that out, and encourage them. And one of the things I do encourage them is to realize how much we don't know.
Yeah.
So one of the things, because kids are always being taught things that we know, they think we know everything, that science knows everything.
Yes. And
so the idea that science doesn't know everything, it blows their minds. I'm really fond of the story about the entomologist in lockdown who decided to do a species survey of his own backyard and found a new species in the middle of the city that no one had ever seen before, right? Probably beetles, it's always beetles. And I tell them that story and they go, oh, whoa, So I think because they don't know what we don't know, they're unlikely to come up with ideas that are complex enough to sustain a book.
But they might have some things that you might be inspired by to then go and find something, as in the people listening as well, I mean.
Yes, I think for me it's about when kids come up with ideas, it's about turning it back to them and encouraging them to do it themselves.
Yeah.
That's my job. That my job is to go, you could become a marine biologist and find that out. And they go, you can see them light up and go, I could do that. And I go, yes, you absolutely could. No reason why you can't. And that to me is far more important than, because ideas, people think that ideas are hard, right? People always think, where do you get your ideas from is the most common question that we're asked. And ideas are 10 a penny. Mm-hmm. It's like I can walk down the street in the middle of Sydney and I could come up with half a dozen natural history books ideas without even trying.
Yeah.
And for example, I was at flea markets the other day and in the branches above my head were ibises, Sydney ibises, the bin chickens of fame. And Liz and Nellie's just done a book called Bin Chickens.
Yes.
Right? They're there. The ideas are there. It's not hard to get ideas. I have 15 books signed up in my head to write.
Yes.
So I don't want anybody to give me ideas. I don't want children to give me ideas. I have too many of my own.
That's what you do with them.
What I do with, yes. And, you've got to have, you get ideas all the time. And some of them will resonate with you and some of them won't. And they just fade away. And some of them are interesting, but they're not enough for a book.
Yeah.
For example, in Seed to Sky, one of my favourite things about the daintree is the 4 o'clock moth. Mm-hmm. It comes out at 4 o'clock every afternoon. We don't know why. It just does. Now, I love that fact, but it's not enough for a book. You can't make a whole book with 4 o'clock moth unless it's fiction.
Yes.
And then it would be, and this idea is literally just occurring to me as I speak to you, Emma. If it was fiction, it would be the 4 o'clock moth who doesn't want to fly at 4 o'clock. It would be about wanting to break away from the crowd. That's what that book would be. And it would be fiction. But as a natural history book, there's not enough in the 4 o'clock moth. Mm-hmm. It would sustain the book. So when you're looking for ideas, you're looking for ideas that are sufficiently complex and rich. And because these books are effectively ecosystem books, you're looking for an ecosystem ideally that hasn't been damaged too much, but also one that has cycles embedded in it somehow. There's some kind of story embedded in it. Sometimes you have to go there to find that out. The Great Barrier Reef book that we're doing next. I'd done a huge amount of research. I still didn't know what the story was until we went up and did several days of snorkeling. And it came down to the fact that everything moves to stay alive on the reef. And so it's going to be called a world in motion. But sometimes you just have to have really complex stuff for one of these books, because it has to sustain interest not only once, but over and over and over again.
That's beautiful. That was really just so nice to be talking through your process and the ways that the stories and the books are developed from idea to end, and then 10 years later as well, what's happened to them. I guess as a science communicator, I hear from what you're saying that you're hoping that the takeaway for your readers is on multiple levels.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things you have to acknowledge when you're writing for children in particular is that children are as different as adults are. People talk about, oh, kids do X, Y, Z, or only in the sense that all adults do X, Y, Z, So the same, you have 5 kids read the book and there will be 5 different takeaways.
Yes.
So the key is and this is true for adults. I mean, I've written a lot of nonfiction for adults as well as a trainer and teaching writing and so on. You have to layer. Very few people are abstract thinkers, but you've got to have the abstractions there for the people who are, and then you've got to have different layers of concrete information or ideas for people. So it doesn't matter what age I'm writing for. If I have an abstraction, I also have a concrete example of that abstraction. Mm-hmm. Most people, and certainly children, aren't literally physically unable to think abstractly until they're about 14. So you can't do it. You can't put abstractions in for children. But each child comes away with something different. And the idea is to make the book rich enough that every child who reads it will find something for themselves. And that might be a single image. It might be a phrase that echoes in their head like a poem. It might be information. It might be concepts, huge concepts, this idea of an ecosystem. Each child that reads that book will come away with something different. And your job is to make it complex and rich enough so that everybody can find something there.
That's beautiful. Would you have any final thoughts, advice, or something that you would like to share that we haven't talked about?
I guess if you're writing for kids, the big thing is if you read something and part of you goes, wow, then kids will want to know about it. If you go, God, that's cool. Wow, I didn't know that. Those kinds of emotional reactions that you are giving to your subject matter. And you may have to go back in time. You may have to go back to the first time you started studying this stuff.
Yeah.
Because you know it too well now. So part of it is getting distance from it. That go back to the first time you heard about something, about why you chose to study it in the first place often. Those are the things that kids will react to. And you're looking to start an emotional reaction in them. Whether that is excitement or disgust, or they love disgust, or if you can get gross out of them, that's fantastic. Also, love, a desire to protect, a desire to conserve, a feeling of fellowship and connection. The things that you felt when you first started looking at your subject, that's what you're after. Children. And so you have to go back to those feelings and find the things that make you felt that way.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on the podcast so much. Thank you for that. And it was really lovely to talk to you today, Pamela.
Look, if any of your listeners have questions they want to ask me, you can always find me on Facebook and say, you've heard the podcast and you had a question. I'm happy to answer.
Wonderful. We'll put those links in the show notes for you.
Okay.
Till next time. Thank you. And goodbye.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at thescicommcollective.com. That's com with 2 M's. Questions or comments about today's episode? Get in touch on Instagram at the SciComm Collective. The SciComm Collective is supported by UWA's Grand Challenges Impact Grant.